So as many of you already know, the original Peloton's bike price has been lowered by $400. So now it's only $1,495. And this compared to the Peloton Bike Plus now is a $1,000 difference. And I've made videos and articles in the past on the exact differences between these two bikes, but today I want to put a price on some of those differences to see if they all add up and see if the value is worth the extra $1,000 for the Peloton Bike Plus. And we're gonna get started right now. Hey everybody, this is Colin Jenkins with Connect the Watts, where we make guides just like this, as well as reviews and news updates for everything connected fitness. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the differences between the Peloton Original and the Peloton Bike Plus to see if the differences add up to the $1,000. And we're gonna get started with the screen. And the differences between these two screens might seem small, but they're actually pretty big. So let's get right into it. The larger Peloton Bike Plus screen is 23.8 inches, whereas the original Peloton Bike has a screen that is 21.5 inches. So just a little bit over 2 inches larger, which again isn't huge, but when you're that close to the screen, it's very noticeable. Also, the screen for the Peloton Bike Plus is a little bit better in that it has this anti-smudge technology on it, which basically means that your fingerprints show up a little bit less. But the biggest difference between these two screens is the hardware they support. The original Peloton Bike has 2 gigabytes of RAM, whereas the Peloton Bike Plus has 4 gigabytes, so twice the RAM. And this is extremely important because Peloton is always advancing what they are doing. And if you look at even what's coming up ahead soon, like the upcoming Peloton video game, as they continue to add more and more advanced features to the Peloton screen, the more outdated and slow your Peloton screen is going to run. Even just turning these two screens on, you'll notice that the Peloton Bike Plus turns on way quicker and runs way smoother than the original Peloton. And this problem is likely to continue to get worse and worse and worse until eventually they will actually discontinue that original Peloton screen, maybe within 3 to 5 years. And at that point, you won't have to buy a new bike, but you may have to order a new screen that has more RAM. And so that is why that 4 gigabytes of RAM is so important. And that's why I value the difference between these two screens at least $250. Another very noticeable difference between the Peloton Bike Plus and the original Peloton is that this screen for the Peloton Bike Plus rotates a full 360 degrees. The original Peloton Bike screen doesn't rotate. And this is a great feature if you like to use your bike for strength classes or if you want to participate in boot camp classes. But with the original Peloton Bike, all you have to do is order the pivot, which turns your screen into a rotating screen. I have a link in the description below. It costs about $50 or so, but if you order that, it's very easy to install and it allows your original bike screen to have that same 360 degree rotation. So I value the screen rotation of the Peloton Bike Plus at $50. The Peloton Bike Plus also has Apple Gym Kit, which allows it to get your heart rate data from your Apple Watch. The original Peloton Bike does not have this. However, the problem I have with this Apple Gym Kit integration is that it only works for cycling classes. It doesn't work for workouts off the bike. It was taken away earlier this year from workouts off the bike, like boot camp classes and strength classes. And so it doesn't have the full functionality that you may really want. So in order to connect my Apple Watch to my Peloton Bike Plus for all of the classes, I went ahead and ordered a watch link. And this is a device you can place on the back of your Peloton and it connects all of the data right to the Peloton Bike for all the classes. And it works for the original Peloton Bike as well. And with our code Connect the Watts, you can get this for $45. So I value that Apple Watch connection, full Apple Watch connection at $45. And since the Peloton Bike Plus only has a partial Apple Watch connection, I value that at $25. The Peloton Bike Plus also has better microphones and a better camera, but since I haven't heard of anybody ever using either of those things on their Peloton, I'm gonna value that at $0. It does also have a more advanced Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connection. Now the Bluetooth connection going from 4.0 to Bluetooth 5.0 just makes it go a little bit farther, which I don't think is worth really anything since you're never gonna be really that far away from the bike because you have to at least be able to see the screen. The Wi-Fi connectivity though is worth a little bit more because it does allow the bike to connect to both the 2 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz types of Wi-Fi, which means for a lot of people, it'll have a much stronger internet connection, which means less buffering, less frozen classes, all of that. So I do think there is value in that better Wi-Fi connection, and I'll value that at $50. There also is a pretty significant difference in the sound system between these two bikes. The original bike, I believe, has 16 watts and the Peloton Bike Plus has 26 watts, but also includes 2 subwoofers in the back. And honestly, the sound difference is pretty significant. There's no mistaking one for the other, and the Peloton Bike Plus is much better. However, you also could buy a nice Bluetooth speaker for right next to the Peloton, and that would run you about $50. So I value this sound system at $50. Speaking of sound, the headphone jack placement is different between these two bikes. On the original bike, the audio jack was in the back of the screen, which means if you had headphones which were wired, that wire had to go all the way back behind the bike. On the new Peloton Bike Plus, the audio jack is right in center between your handlebars, so it makes the connection much easier and less awkward to use. I personally use wireless headphones, so it doesn't make a difference to me, but I do see value in this placement, and I'd value it at about $15. Now, one of my favorite features of the Peloton Bike Plus is the auto adjusting resistance. And what this is during classes, when you take a class that is not live, you'll have your resistance automatically adjusted and you don't have to adjust it yourself. And I find this really nice. I use it all the time, except of course for Power Zone classes. I think it's a great feature and one that I really do value. And to me, at least, this is worth $200. And the reason the Peloton Bike can do this is because it runs on digital over mechanical resistance. And this not only allows for auto adjust, but it also makes turning the resistance much smoother and faster. And one of the big things, it allows for digital calibration. See, with the older original bikes, you never really know for sure if your bike is calibrated 100% correctly. You'll hear people all the time going from the older bikes to the newer bikes and being completely shocked when their power output changes. And this is because the newer bikes have that digital calibration, which means they're all accurately calibrated all of the time, which means you never have to worry about your numbers changing or if your numbers are real. On the Peloton Bike Plus, you know that your numbers are well calibrated. And if you like chasing numbers on the leaderboard, well, that's probably a very important feature to have. To me, I'm a big numbers guy. I want to know if my numbers are improving rather than my calibration being off. And so I value this at $100. The Peloton Bike Plus also has a better and easier to use adjustment system. And for me, I share my bike with my wife, so I'm adjusting this thing every day, all of the time. And having the convenience of a smoother, easier adjustment is very nice. So I do value that at $30. And finally, the most subjective of all of the differences is the more premium look. The Peloton Bike Plus just looks a little nicer. It has less wires exposed. It looks like a more premium product. And I know how people value that could be completely different depending on if that is important to you or not. To me, it's a little important, but not too important. So I do value it, but I value it at $50. All right, so we've gone over some of the major differences. I've put what I think my value is for these differences. So let's add all of them up and see where we get to. $820. So if you add up all the differences, to me at least, the difference between these two bikes is worth $820. Now, the real price between these two bikes is $1,000, which isn't too far off. And you do have to kind of weigh the convenience of having all of these features rolled into one, and just the convenience of having it all without having to worry about upgrades or getting accessories and all of that. So to me at least, I actually probably would pay the extra $1,000 for the Peloton Bike Plus over the original Peloton bike. But I could see somebody making a case that it would not be necessarily worth it to them based on how they value all of these features. And of course, if you're someone who's just trying to get their very first bike and don't need all of these extra nice features, well, then it's a great value to have that original Peloton bike at $400 cheaper than it ever was. But I want to hear what all of you think. What do you think the value difference between the Peloton Bike Plus and the Peloton Bike Original are? If you had not bought a Peloton yet, which one would you choose if you knew the difference was $1,000? Really interested to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video.